He came home early to a sound he thought he'd never hear again: laughter. But when the Alpha King flung open the door and saw the maid tangled with his daughters, joy turned to rage, and the girls' faces told him the damage was instant. Before this story begins, remember this: even the strongest alpha can be destroyed by what waits behind his own door. When the Alpha King returned home unannounced, he expected silence. But what he found instead will unravel everything he thought he knew. Stay with me, this is where the darkness starts to move. Let's begin. Moonspire Fortress had been silent for 12 months. Not the comfortable quiet of evening prayers or winter snowfall, but the suffocating, bone-deep silence of grief that clung to every stone wall like frost that would never melt. The grand halls that once echoed with childish laughter and tiny wolf howls now carried only the hollow footsteps of servants who moved through their duties like ghosts haunting their own lives. Alpha King Sylvan Lupin had not slept within these walls for nearly 3 moons. He told himself it was duty, border disputes with the northern packs, rogue sightings near the eastern ridges, war councils that stretched into dawn. But the truth clawed at him in the darkest hours. He was running. Every corridor whispered Alara's name. Every bedchamber held the phantom scent of her hair. Every hearthroom remembered her laugh. And worst of all were his daughters. Lyra, Kayla, and Freya, 5 years old, born under the triple moon, blessed by the goddess herself, had not spoken a single word since the night the rogues came. They had watched their mother die. Watched her bleed out on the fortress steps, while Sylvan fought through the attackers too late, always too late. The triplets moved through the castle hand in hand now, like paper dolls cut from the same sheet of sorrow. Their eyes were empty. Their wolf spirits, once so vibrant they would shiver beneath their skin during playtime, had gone dormant. No healers could wake them. No elders could coax even a whimper from their lips. So Sylvan did what he did best: he left. He buried himself in campaigns and bloodshed, anything to avoid the unbearable weight of his failure as a father and a mate. It was Elder Cashin who finally acted. Without Sylvan's permission, he sent word to the Rowanhart clan in the Southern Territories, a family known for their healing gifts and gentle temperaments. They sent Talia. She arrived on a rain-soaked morning, carrying nothing but a worn leather satchel and a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in a fortress built for war. Talia Rowanhart was young, perhaps 23 winters, with warm brown eyes and hands that moved with practiced gentleness. She had trained under the clan's most gifted trauma healers, specializing in wolf children who had witnessed violence. Sylvan saw her only once before he left again for the northern borders. She had been walking down the eastern corridor, arms full of woven baskets containing wooden toys, dried herbs, and small carved animals. She had nodded respectfully as he passed. He barely acknowledged her. What use was another healer when his daughters were already lost? But Talia did not work the way the others had. She did not demand speech or force interaction. She simply existed in their space, humming old songs while she mended their torn dresses, sitting quietly by the fire while she whittled small wooden wolves, leaving warm milk and honey cakes outside their chamber door each morning. Slowly, like ice beginning to crack beneath spring sun, the triplets began to notice her. Lyra watched from behind a pillar as Talia arranged wildflowers in clay pots. Kayla crept closer when Talia read stories aloud to the empty hearth room. Freya's fingers eventually reached out to touch the carved animals Talia left on their breakfast table. And then, one morning as fog rolled through the castle grounds, Lyra whispered the first words spoken in Moonspire Fortress in a year. Talia. The name was small, fragile, barely more than breath, but it was everything. Within weeks, all 3 girls were speaking again. Only to her. Only when they felt safe. But they were speaking, laughing softly, even playing tentative games by the fire. Sylvan knew none of this. He was too far away, too buried in his self-imposed exile. Until the afternoon he returned without warning. The border skirmish had ended faster than expected. Sylvan rode through Munspire's gates as storm clouds gathered overhead, his armor still mud-splattered, exhaustion grinding against his bones. The fortress should have been silent. It always was. But as he crossed the main courtyard, he heard something impossible. Laughter. Bright, clear, achingly alive. His daughter's laughter. Sylvan froze mid-stride, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged wolf. Blood roared in his ears. His hands trembled as he followed the sound through the stone corridors toward the hearth room. He stopped outside the door, fingers pressed against ancient wood, barely breathing. The laughter continued, giggles and shrieks of pure joy that he thought he would never hear again. If you're still watching, good. Because the moment you think you understand these characters, the truth shifts beneath their feet. What happens next will break loyalty, expose secrets, and change the Alpha King forever. Don't move. Sylvan pushed the door open. What he saw shattered him completely. The hearth room glowed like a painting from a forgotten dream. A roaring fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with tapestries depicting wolves beneath silver moons. Dozens of candles flickered on shelves and tables, their warm light pooling across the worn rugs scattered over flagstone floors. Wooden toys lay strewn everywhere, carved horses, miniature castles, little wolves with joints that moved. And in the center of it all, Talia Rowanhart was on her hands and knees, laughing breathlessly, while Lyra, Kayla, and Freya climbed onto her back like wolf pups play fighting with their mother. Their hair, usually braided tight and proper, hung wild and free around their flushed faces. Lyra shrieked with pure joy as she wrapped her small arms around Talia's neck. Kayla bounced on Talia's back, giggling uncontrollably. Freya crouched nearby in an exaggerated wolf pup stance, her little hands curled into pretend claws. "I'm the alpha of this pack," Freya declared, voice bright and fierce. "Never." Talia growled playfully, gently bucking like a horse, sending the girls into fresh peals of laughter. For one breathless moment, Sylvan felt nothing but overwhelming relief. His daughters were alive again. Their voices filled the room like birdsong after endless winter. Then something darker coiled through his chest. She did what I couldn't. The thought struck like a blade between his ribs. This stranger, this maid, had reached his daughters when he had failed completely. She had coaxed life back into their broken hearts while he ran from his responsibilities like a coward. Jealousy rose sharp and ugly, tangling with grief and shame until he couldn't breathe properly. "What is this?" His voice exploded through the room like thunder. The laughter died instantly. The triplets froze mid-movement, their bright expressions draining into pale masks of fear. Talia scrambled upright, eyes wide, smoothing her simple dress with trembling hands. "Your Majesty, I was only— Get your hands off my daughters!" Sylvan roared, his wolf rising beneath his skin, eyes flashing gold. The girls flinched as one, huddling together like frightened animals. "You were brought here to heal them, not—" His voice cracked with barely controlled fury. "Not roll around on the floor, like some tavern wench. You overstepped. You've made them forget their station, forget their mother. I would never." Talia's voice broke. "You're dismissed." Sylvan's words fell like an executioner's blade. "Leave this fortress. Now." The triplets made no sound, but their faces told the story. Betrayal, confusion, terror flooding their eyes as the fragile world Talia had built for them shattered like glass. Kayla's lip trembled. Lyra's fingers dug into Freya's arm. The light that had returned to their faces guttered out like candles in a sudden wind. Silence crashed back into the room with suffocating weight. Talia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She bowed her head, unable to meet the children's devastated gazes. "As you command, Your Majesty." She turned and walked from the hearth room, each step measured and deliberate, refusing to let herself break until she was beyond those ancient stone walls. Behind her, the triplets sank to the floor in a tight knot of tangled limbs and wild hair, their expressions gone completely blank. They stared at their father with eyes that had forgotten how to trust. And Sylvan stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched, watching his daughters disappear back into the silence he had just condemned them to. What had he done? Sylvan stood in his war room, staring at maps he couldn't see, justifying what couldn't be justified. She was too familiar with them, he muttered to the empty air. They're princesses. Royal blood. They cannot be raised like common. You're lying to yourself. Elder Cashin's voice cut through the stone chamber like a blade through silk. The old wolf stood in the doorway, his weathered face carved with disappointment. She healed them, Sylvan. She brought your daughters back from the abyss when no one else could. And you destroyed it in seconds because your pride couldn't bear that someone succeeded where you failed. Sylvan's jaw clenched. I am their father. I am their king. You are a coward. Cashin's words landed with brutal finality. And if you don't fix this, you'll lose them forever. The elder left without waiting for dismissal. Dinner was a funeral. The triplets sat at the long table like porcelain dolls, hands folded in their laps, eyes fixed on nothing. Servants placed roasted venison, honeyed bread, and berry tarts before them. Foods they once loved. They didn't touch a single bite. Sylvan watched from the head of the table, fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Girls, you need to eat. Silence. Lyra. Koila. Freya. His voice softened, almost pleading. Please. Kayla's fingers twitched slightly. Nothing more. They barely seemed to breathe. After 20 agonizing minutes, Sylvan dismissed them. They filed out hand in hand, silent as ghosts, leaving their plates untouched. He sat alone in the cavernous dining hall, surrounded by cold stone and colder memories, refusing to name the guilt clawing up his throat. I did what was right. I protected them. I am their father. The words rang hollow even in his own mind. Hours later, Sylvan walked the darkened corridors, unable to sleep, haunted by images of Talia's face as she left, the tears she wouldn't let fall, the betrayal in her eyes. As he passed the triplets' chamber, he heard something that stopped his heart. Whispers. Tiny, broken whispers seeping through the crack beneath the door. Did Talia leave because of us? Lyra's voice trembled. Maybe we were bad, Kayla whispered. No. Freya's reply was fierce but fragile. Daddy scared her away. He was angry. He's always angry now. He always leaves, Lyra said quietly. He'll leave again tomorrow. Maybe he doesn't want us anymore, Kayla breathed. Maybe we remind him too much of Mama. Sylvan's knees buckled. He collapsed against the corridor wall, sliding down until he sat crumpled on cold stone, both hands clawing at the floor as if he could dig his way out of the crushing weight pressing against his chest. His daughters didn't trust him. They feared him. They thought they were the reason everyone left. And worst of all, they were right about him. He had been running. From them. From grief. From everything that mattered. Talia hadn't replaced their mother. She had simply been present when he refused to be. She had loved them when he was too broken to try. She had succeeded because she stayed. A sound escaped Sylvan's throat, something between a growl and a sob. His wolf whimpered inside him, aching with a pain no battle wound had ever matched. His daughters trusted Talia more than they trusted him, because Talia had earned it, and he had destroyed her for it. Sylvan pushed himself upright, legs shaking, decision crystallizing like ice in his chest. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. He would ride to Rowanhart territory. He would find Talia. And he would beg, not as an alpha king, not as a commander of armies, but as a broken father who finally understood what his daughters needed. Someone who would stay. Sylvan rode through the night. The forests between Moonspire and Rowanhart territory were dense with ancient pines and frost-slicked trails that could break a horse's leg in darkness. He didn't care. His mount stumbled twice crossing icy streams. He barely noticed. By the time dawn broke pale and cold over the southern woodlands, Sylvan looked nothing like an alpha king. Mud splattered his cloak. Dark circles carved shadows beneath his eyes. His hands trembled against the reins, not from cold, but from something far deeper. He was a shell, hollowed out, broken open. The Rowanhart wolves found him before he found them. 6 warriors melted from the tree line, surrounding him with drawn blades and wary golden eyes. Their wolves prowled just beneath their skin, protective and territorial. "State your business, Moonspire." The lead warrior's voice was granite. Sylvan dismounted slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The gesture cost him more than any battle ever had. "I seek Talia Rowanhart." His voice was rough, scraped raw. "Please. I need to speak with her." Not a command. A request. The warriors exchanged glances. One vanished into the trees. Minutes stretched like hours until finally, a young wolf returned and nodded. "She'll see you. But weapons stay here." Sylvan unbuckled his sword belt without hesitation. They led him to a sunlit clearing where Rowanhart children played among moss-covered stones and wildflower patches. Talia sat cross-legged beneath an old oak tree, surrounded by wolf pups no older than his daughters, teaching them how to braid dried herbs into healing bundles. She looked up as he approached. Her warm brown eyes held no anger, only a quiet sadness that cut deeper than rage ever could. Sylvan stopped 3 paces away. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Alpha King of Moonspire sank to his knees on the cold earth. The wolf pups gasped. The Rowanhart warriors stiffened in shock. Talia's hands stilled over the herbs. "I failed them." Sylvan's voice cracked like breaking ice. "I failed my daughters. I failed you. I failed everyone who trusted me to be more than this." He gestured vaguely at himself, the wreckage of a man pretending to be whole. "Everything you did, everything you built with them, I destroyed it because I was too broken to see it for what it was. A gift. The only light they've had in a year." His throat worked against the words clawing their way out. "Help me. Please. Help me heal my daughters." Talia studied him for a long moment, her healer's eyes seeing past armor and titles to the shattered father beneath. "You don't need a healer, Your Majesty." Her voice was gentle but unyielding. "You need to be their father." "I don't know how anymore," Sylvan whispered. "I don't know how to be in that fortress without seeing Elara everywhere. Without drowning in." "Then learn to swim," Talia said quietly. "Grief doesn't disappear because you run from it. It waits. And while you've been running, your daughters have been drowning alone." Sylvan flinched as if struck. Talia rose, brushing dirt from her simple dress. "If I return, things will be different. Anything." The word came instantly. "You stay with your daughters. No more campaigns. No more border disputes that conveniently last months. You stay." "I will." "You stop running from your grief. You face it. You let them see you mourn their mother because they need to know it's safe to mourn too." Sylvan nodded, throat too tight for words. "And you never, never lash out at them or anyone caring for them again." Her eyes blazed with quiet steel. "Because healing is fragile, Your Majesty. And trust, once broken, may never fully mend." "I promise." Sylvan's voice was barely a rasp. "I swear it on my wolf, on my crown, on everything I am." Talia searched his face one final time. Then she nodded. "I'll return with you at sunset. But I come as their caretaker and your partner in healing them, not as a servant to be dismissed at your convenience." "Agreed." Sylvan remained kneeling. "Thank you." Talia stepped through the gates of Moonspire Fortress as the sun dipped below the western mountains, painting the stone walls in shades of amber and rose. She had barely crossed the threshold of the main courtyard when a door burst open. 3 small bodies exploded from the entrance, like arrows released from a bow. Talia. Lyra reached her first, crashing into Talia's legs with enough force to nearly knock her over. Kayla came half a second later, arms wrapping around Talia's waist. Freya collided with them all, and suddenly Talia was drowning in a tangle of small arms, wild hair, and desperate sobs. "You came back," Lyra wept into Talia's dress. "You came back, you came back, you came back." "We thought you left forever," Kayla sobbed. "We were so scared," Freya whispered, voice breaking. Talia sank to her knees, gathering all 3 girls into her arms, tears streaming freely down her own face. "I'm here, little wolves. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." She held them as they shook with relief, stroking their hair, murmuring soft reassurances, letting them cry out every fear they'd been holding since she left. Sylvan stood in the shadow of the archway, watching. His chest felt like it was caving in. Shame and gratitude warred inside him with such violence he could barely breathe. This was what love looked like, messy, desperate, unguarded. And his daughters trusted this young healer with a depth they'd never shown him, because she had earned it by simply being there. After long minutes, Freya pulled back slightly, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "We made something for you, but we hid them because we thought Daddy would be angry." Sylvan's stomach dropped. The triplets reached into the hidden pockets of their dresses and pulled out small wooden figures, crudely carved but unmistakably made with love. A wolf, a flower, a heart. "We worked on them every night," Lyra whispered. "So you'd know we didn't forget you." Talia's breath caught. She cradled the tiny carvings in her palms like they were made of glass. "They're beautiful. The most beautiful gifts I've ever received." Sylvan turned away, pressing his forehead against cold stone, fighting the urge to collapse. His daughters had hidden love because they feared his anger. What kind of father had he become? Over the following days, Talia began rebuilding what had been shattered. She reestablished their morning routine, braiding hair by the window while humming old songs. She brought the wooden toys back to the hearth room and coaxed the girls into wolf cub games again, crawling on all fours, play growling, teaching them it was safe to be wild and free. She practiced gentle touch healing, running her hands over their small shoulders and backs, releasing the tension trauma had locked into their bodies. She sang. She laughed. She reconnected them to the fortress itself, taking them to the kitchens to bake honey cakes, to the gardens to pick winter berries, to the stables to brush the horses' manes. Slowly, carefully, life began flowing back into Moonspire's halls. And through it all, Sylvan watched from the shadows. He stood in darkened doorways, observing how Talia moved with his daughters, patient, warm, never demanding, always present. He saw how Lyra leaned into her touch, how Kayla's laughter came easier each day, how Freya's eyes regained their spark. He watched and learned. Because Talia had been right, he didn't need a healer. He needed to learn how to be the father his daughters deserved. And for the first time since Alara's death, Sylvan stopped running. He stayed. Even when the memories threatened to drown him, even when grief clawed at his throat, even when every instinct screamed at him to flee, he stayed. Because his daughters needed him to learn how to swim. And he would not fail them again. Talia found Sylvan standing outside the hearth room the next morning, shoulders rigid, hands clenched at his sides like he was preparing for battle. "They're just playing," she said softly. "You can join them." I don't know how. The admission cost him everything. Talia studied the Alpha King, this warrior who had led armies and conquered territories, paralyzed by the simple act of sitting with his own daughters. "Come," she said gently. "I'll show you." She led him inside. The triplets looked up from their wooden animals, eyes widening. Kayla immediately scooted closer to Lyra. "Just sit on the floor with them," Talia whispered. "Nothing more. Just be present." Sylvan lowered himself awkwardly to the rug, his large frame seeming out of place among tiny toys and cushions. The girls watched him like wary deer. Silence stretched uncomfortably. "Tell them a story," Talia prompted quietly. "Something soft. About when you were young." Sylvan cleared his throat. "When I was a boy, I once tried to race a wild stag through." His voice came out too loud, too commanding. Freya flinched. Lyra's shoulders hunched. Sylvan stopped, jaw clenching in frustration. "Softer," Talia murmured. "You cannot command healing, Your Majesty. You must earn it." The days that followed were humbling. Sylvan showed up for breakfast, sitting at the table while the girls picked at their food and avoided his eyes. He appeared at bedtime, standing awkwardly in the doorway until Talia invited him to sit in the corner while she sang lullabies. He attended morning lessons, watching Talia teach them about herbs and stars. He didn't speak much, didn't push, just stayed. One evening, Kayla had a nightmare, screaming about rogues and blood. Sylvan rushed to their chamber, but froze in the doorway, unsure. Talia gestured him forward. "Hold her." His hands shook as he gathered his sobbing daughter against his chest, feeling how small she was, how fragile. He murmured broken reassurances until her breathing steadied. She didn't pull away. The breakthrough came a week later. They sat in the garden, watching winter birds. Sylvan had been quiet, simply existing in their space as Talia had taught him. Freya stood, took 3 hesitant steps toward him, and reached for his hand. Sylvan's breath stopped. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his scarred knuckles. "Your hands are big," she whispered. Like a wolf's paws, he managed, voice thick. The corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That night, after the girls were tucked into bed, Sylvan returned to their chamber. Talia started to rise, but he shook his head. He knelt beside their beds, hands trembling. "I'm sorry." His voice quivered like wind through broken glass. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stay when you needed me most." Lyra's lip trembled. Kayla's eyes filled with tears. "I miss your mama too," Sylvan whispered. "Every single day. And I was so afraid that staying here would drown me. But running away only hurt you more." "Daddy." Lyra's small voice broke. "I'm here now, little wolf. I promise. I'm here." Freya sat up and wrapped her arms around his neck. Then Kayla. Then Lyra. And Sylvan wept, for the first time since Alara died, holding his daughters while they cried together. Healing the cracks that had nearly destroyed them all. The messenger arrived at dawn, breathless and mud-splattered. "Rogues, Your Majesty. Eastern border. They've burned 2 outer villages." Sylvan's wolf surged beneath his skin, battle instincts roaring to life. His hand moved automatically toward his sword belt. Duty. Protection. Va. The old patterns pulled at him like iron chains. Leave. Fight. Bury himself in blood and strategy where grief couldn't reach him. He was halfway to the armory when he stopped. Behind him, down the corridor, he could hear Talia singing a morning song to the triplets. Lyra's soft giggle floated through the stone halls. His daughters. Laughing. Because he had stayed. Sylvan stood frozen between 2 worlds, the warrior he had always been and the father he was learning to become. "Your Majesty?" The messenger shifted nervously. "Send General Matthias," Sylvan said quietly. "He commands the Eastern forces." "But sire, you always—" "Not this time." Talia found him in the corridor afterward, jaw clenched, fighting every instinct screaming at him to mount his horse and ride. "You stayed," she said softly. "It feels wrong." His voice was raw. "Men are dying. I should be." "Your people have generals," Talia interrupted gently. "Trained warriors who can lead battles. But your daughters have only you. And they need you here more than your army needs another sword." Sylvan closed his eyes, breathing through the war raging inside him. She was right. He had to be right. That afternoon, something miraculous happened. Sylvan sat by the hearth, attempting to stack wooden blocks with Freya. He knocked over the tower accidentally, and instead of apologizing stiffly, he made an exaggerated, shocked face. Freya giggled. Then Kayla laughed. Then Lyra snorted, which made all three dissolve into fits of laughter, and Sylvan found himself laughing too. Real laughter, deep and unguarded. The sound filled Moonspire's halls like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. And then, Lyra's wolf rippled beneath her skin. Soft silver fur shimmered along her arms. Tiny wolf ears flickered atop her head for just a heartbeat before disappearing. Sylvan froze, wonder flooding through him. Kayla's eyes flashed gold. Freya's fingers sprouted delicate claws for 3 seconds before retracting. Their wolves, dormant for over a year, were waking. The triplets looked at each other in awe, then scrambled toward their father, curling against him by the fire like wolf pups seeking warmth from their alpha. Sylvan wrapped his arms around them, throat too tight for words. Across the room, Talia watched quietly, pride and relief shining in her eyes. The Alpha King had finally chosen to stay, and his family was beginning to heal. 6 months passed like snow melting into spring. Moonspire Fortress transformed. Laughter echoed through corridors that had known only silence. The triplets raced through the halls playing chase, their wolves flickering beneath their skin in joyful bursts. They chattered endlessly at meals, argued over wooden toys by the hearth, and sang off-key songs that made the servants smile. Talia no longer moved through the castle as a servant. She sat at the family table during dinners, walked beside Sylvan during evening strolls through the grounds, became the steady heartbeat around which the broken family learned to dance again. The wooden animals from that first hearthroom scene remained scattered throughout the fortress, symbols of the healing that had saved them all. One crisp autumn morning, Elder Cashin approached Sylvan with a suggestion. "It's time to honor Queen Alara properly. A moon garden on the Memorial Hill, silver moon lilies beneath the stars. A place the girls can visit. A place to remember without drowning." Sylvan's first instinct was to refuse, to run from the pain. But he didn't. Instead, he found Talia and the triplets in the library and asked quietly, "Will you help me plan a garden for your mother?" They climbed the Memorial Hill together as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and violet. Sylvan carried the silver moon lily bulbs. The triplets carried small wooden shovels. Talia brought water skins and soft blankets. They knelt in the rich earth and began to dig. Lyra planted the first bulb. For Mama's smile. Kayla planted the second. For her songs. Freya planted the third. So she knows we remember. Sylvan's hands shook as he covered the bulbs with soil. His voice came out broken. "I was afraid. After she died, I was terrified that if I stayed close to you, I'd lose you too. That grief would take you the way it took her." The triplets looked up at him with eyes far older than their 6 years. "So you left us instead," Lyra whispered, not accusing, just understanding. "Yes." Sylvan's throat worked. "And I was wrong. So wrong." Talia rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Grief doesn't need to be conquered, Sylvan. It doesn't need to be defeated or outrun. It just needs to be carried. And you don't have to carry it alone." Sylvan looked at her. This healer, who had saved more than his daughter's voices. She had saved his soul. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on us." Talia smiled softly. "You're worth staying for." The triplets piled into their father's lap, and together they watched the first stars emerge above the Memorial Hill. A family learning to carry grief together. Learning to heal. The moon rose full and luminous over the Memorial Hill, casting silver light across the freshly turned earth where silver moon lilies now rested. Sylvan sat with his daughters tucked against him, Talia beside them, all watching the stars emerge one by one from the deepening twilight. Then the forest went silent. Every cricket, every night bird, every rustling leaf, all sounds ceased as if the world itself held its breath. At the edge of the tree line, something moved. A wolf stepped from the shadows, massive, ethereal, its fur shimmering like moonlight on water. It was translucent, woven from starlight and memory, its eyes the exact shade of amber that Sylvan had loved for too brief a time. "Elara," he breathed. The triplets gasped as one.
"Nana."
The spirit wolf moved with impossible grace, padding silently across the hill toward them. She stopped 3 paces away, her luminous gaze settling first on the girls, drinking in their faces with a mother's eternal love. Lyra reached out a trembling hand. The spirit leaned forward, and though there was no physical touch, warmth spread through the child like summer sunlight. Then the wolf's gaze moved to Sylvan. Pain and forgiveness mingled in those amber eyes. Live, they seemed to say, "Love them. Don't waste what remains." Finally, the spirit turned to Talia. Anne bowed. A deep, reverent acknowledgement, one wolf to another. Gratitude for protecting her cubs when she could not. Permission to love them. Blessing for what was and what could be. Talia's breath caught, tears streaming silently down her face as she bowed her head in return. The spirit wolf lifted her muzzle toward the moon and released a soundless howl that resonated in their bones, their souls, their very essence. Then she dissolved into starlight, scattering across the night sky like 1,000 fireflies returning home. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sylvan gathered his daughters closer, his voice rough with emotion but steady with conviction. "I'm here," he promised, pressing kisses to their wild hair. "I stay now. Always. No more running. No more hiding. We face everything together. Promise." Freya whispered, "I swear it on my wolf, on my crown, on everything I am." Lyra looked up at Talia. "You'll stay too?" Talia smiled through her tears, reaching out to cup the child's face. "Always, little wolf. I'm not going anywhere." The triplets pulled both adults into a tangle of arms and warmth and whispered, "I love yous," that mended what had been shattered. Below them, Moonspire Fortress glowed with candlelight, no longer a monument to grief, but a home filled with healing, laughter, and second chances. The Alpha King had finally learned what true strength meant. Not conquest, not dominance, but staying, loving, being present, and together, father, daughters, and the healer who saved them all, they walked down the hill toward home. Toward tomorrow. Toward life. If you stayed with me till the very end, thank you. Your time, your energy, your support, it means more than you know. And if this story touched you, even for a moment, don't go far. I share new stories every single day, darker, deeper, more magical, more heartbreaking. So make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's story will take you even further into worlds you've never imagined.